The cold inside the cardiac ICU clung to me like frost, sharper than the November wind from 6 weeks ago when all of this began. A nurse in pale blue scrubs stood at the foot of my bed, clutching her clipboard like a shield, her eyes carefully avoiding mine. The air smelled of antiseptic, a faint metallic trace of my own blood drying along the foreline, and something heavier, like a decision had already been made without me. "Mrs. Calloway," she said softly, the way people speak at funerals, "your insurance claim has been denied. The primary policyholder canceled coverage 48 hours ago. If we don't receive payment or a valid replacement by tomorrow, the hospital will transfer you to county care." I just stared at her. The machines around me kept beeping, steady and mechanical, counting out seconds of a life that suddenly didn't feel like mine anymore. 6 weeks ago I was a 31-year-old elementary school art teacher in Portland, married for 4 years to a man I trusted. Now I was lying in a hospital bed, a fresh surgical scar running down my chest, my heart literally stitched back together after what doctors called a sudden cardiac event. And my husband, the one who held the insurance, had vanished the night before my surgery. He said he was going to the bank to arrange a loan. He never came back. "There has to be a mistake," I whispered. "My husband, Daniel, he wouldn't do this. He's my emergency contact. He signed everything." The nurse's expression tightened. She lowered the clipboard slightly. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "The billing office has called his number 11 times in the last 2 days. It goes straight to voicemail." She hesitated, then added, "A woman answered once. She said you were no longer Mr. Calloway's concern." A woman. The words landed deep, right beneath my ribs, exactly where my heart had just been repaired. I closed my eyes. And suddenly the last 6 months replayed in fragments. Daniel working late. Daniel flipping his phone face down at dinner. Daniel brushing off my chest pains, telling me it was stress. Too much coffee, anxiety. Daniel handing me tea every night, kissing my forehead, telling me he just wanted me to feel better. Telling me. Always telling me. I opened my eyes again. Did they figure out what caused it? The cardiac event. The nurse hesitated. "Dr. Reyes wants to speak to you himself. Your toxicology report came back this morning." She paused like she almost said more but didn't. "Try to rest," she added before quietly leaving the room. After she was gone, the silence settled in. Just the steady sound of my heart, beating in a rhythm it hadn't chosen. "I should tell you something before this goes any further. My name is Claire. Claire Ellen Calloway, formerly Claire Whitfield. And if you had asked me 6 weeks ago who I was, I would have told you I was nobody special. An orphan from the foster system outside Eugene. Community college. Art degree from Portland State. Married at 27 to a man who once told me my smile looked like sunlight after a Portland winter. No family. No inheritance. No real past. That's what I believed. That's what I was told." The man in the dark gray suit arrived at exactly 3:47 that afternoon. I remember because I had been staring at the clock, trying not to cry, trying to figure out how I was going to pay for even one more night in that hospital, trying to imagine what life looked like after surviving something like this only to have nowhere to go. He knocked twice on the open door. Polite. Controlled. He looked about 60 tall, with silver hair combed neatly back and the kind of stillness you only see in people who've spent their lives never flinching. Behind him stood a younger woman in a charcoal blazer, holding a leather portfolio. "Mrs. Calloway," he said. And something in the way his voice caught on that name made my chest tighten again. "Forgive the intrusion. My name is Henry Prescott. I'm an attorney from Boston," he said quietly. "I've been looking for you, for 29 years. I would have laughed if I had the strength. I think you have the wrong room." "I don't." He walked toward me slowly, stopping at the side of the bed. Then he did something that knocked the breath out of me. He reached for my hand, the one without the 4, lifted it gently and pressed it to his forehead. A tear slipped from his eye and landed on the white hospital sheet. "You look exactly like her," he whispered. "Exactly like your mother." I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know how to breathe. "Claire," he continued, his voice steadier now, "I know this is the worst possible moment. But I was informed less than an hour ago that you were about to be transferred out of cardiac care." He straightened slightly. "I've already paid your hospital bill. Every dollar. Past, present, and future. You're not going anywhere." I don't understand. He released my hand gently. The woman behind him stepped forward and opened her portfolio. Inside was a photograph. A woman with dark auburn hair and gray eyes, smiling into the camera, holding a small child. The child looked exactly like me. Your birth name, he said carefully, is Claire Elizabeth Whitfield Ashford. Your mother was Margaret Ashford, daughter of Edmund Ashford III. My chest tightened. You were taken from the scene of a car accident outside Manchester, New Hampshire in the winter of 1997. You were 2 years old. The state recorded you as deceased because your car seat was found empty, covered in blood. The room started to tilt. We now know a passing motorist took you to a hospital in another county under a different name. You entered the foster system as a Jane Doe. The name Claire Whitfield came from the hospital bracelet you were given that night. I could feel my pulse in my throat. Your mother died at the scene. Your father, my closest friend, spent the rest of his life searching for you. His voice broke slightly. He died last spring, believing you were still alive. His estate was placed in trust until you were found. He looked directly at me. We found you, Claire. A DNA match confirmed it 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks, I whispered. That's when I started feeling sick. Something shifted in his expression. A shadow passed through it, quick, controlled, but unmistakable. Claire, he said carefully, the Ashford Family Trust is valued at approximately $412 million. The number didn't feel real. But something else did. Every night for 6 months. And suddenly something inside me went cold, sharp, precise. Like a blade sliding into place. An hour later, Dr. Reyes came in. He closed the door behind him before sitting down beside my bed. The man, Henry Prescott, stood by the window now, silent. Claire, the doctor said gently, your toxicology report came back this morning. I already knew. There are elevated levels of a compound called oleandrin in your bloodstream, he continued. It comes from the oleander plant. In small doses, it causes fatigue, nausea, irregular heartbeat. Over time, it damages the heart. My fingers tightened against the sheet. Based on the damage we saw during surgery, you've likely been ingesting it for 4 to 6 months. Is it in food? It dissolves easily in warm liquids. Soup. Anything like that. It has a slightly bitter taste, but it's easy to mask. With honey. With lemon. I nodded slowly. My eyes drifted up to the ceiling, the faint water stain shaped like a rabbit. I'd been staring at it for days. I kept staring now. Doctor, I said quietly, I want the police here today. Before I'm discharged. Dr. Reyes glanced toward Prescott. Prescott gave a small, confirming nod. They're already on their way, the doctor said. We're required to report suspected poisoning. A detective should be here within the hour. I turned my head toward the window. Outside, Portland rain had started again. Soft, gray, familiar. Just like the day I got married. The day Daniel kissed me under a borrowed umbrella and told me I was the only family he would ever need. Recovery was supposed to take 2 weeks. It took 12. Let me be clear about something because honesty matters here. A chest that's been cut open and stitched back together doesn't heal on a dramatic timeline. The first 3 weeks I learned how to breathe without flinching. The next 4 I learned how to walk down a hallway without my hands shaking. After that came 8 weeks of cardiac rehab. 3 mornings a week with a physical therapist named Denise, who did not care that I had suddenly become one of the wealthiest women in New England. She cared that I did my exercises correctly and drank enough water. Henry, he insisted I call him that, moved me to a private rehabilitation facility in the hills above Lake Oswego as soon as I was stable. Not because I asked. Because he knew my husband didn't know I was still alive. When Daniel disappeared the night before my surgery, he didn't just leave. He went home. Forwarded the hospital's contact number to a burner phone. Told the billing office I was no longer his responsibility. Canceled my insurance. Drained our joint account, $84,000. And then he left Portland with a woman named Vanessa Bryce. She was 34. Worked in commercial real estate. And had been sleeping with my husband for 19 months. I know that because Henry hired a private investigator the morning after we met. Daniel thought I was already dead or close enough. Canceling my insurance wasn't panic. It was strategy. He expected the hospital to transfer me to a county facility, where a damaged heart, poisoned slowly over months, would fail without the right care. He had planned it carefully. What he didn't plan for was the toxicology report. Or the cardiologist Henry flew in from Massachusetts the very next day, the one who ordered every test including the one that named the poison. He also didn't know about the trust. My grandfather's will had already been filed. If I died, Daniel wouldn't inherit anything. The estate would pass to a distant relative. He had been trying to kill me for money that would never have been his. He wasn't brilliant. He was small, careless, and just smart enough to think he was clever. I learned all of this during my first week at the rehab facility. I was sitting on a white porch swing, wrapped in a wool blanket, holding a cup of plain hot water. I couldn't bring myself to drink tea anymore. Henry sat across from me, reading from a file labeled with my husband's name. When he finished, I stayed quiet for a long time. Then I asked, how long would it take to get everything on Vanessa Bryce? Her license, finances, history. Henry smiled for the first time. My dear, he said, I already have it. The weeks after that felt like an education in a life I didn't know I owned. I learned the Ashford Trust held stakes in dozens of companies, including, ironically, a controlling share in the very insurance company that had canceled my coverage. I learned my grandfather had been on the board of a major hospital for decades. That's why a top cardiologist showed up so fast. I learned my mother painted watercolors, just like me. And for the first time I understood something important. The life I had before, the small apartment, the old car, the classroom full of kids, it wasn't small. It was real. And I chose to keep that part of me. I didn't contact Daniel. Not once. I ignored his calls. His messages. At one point, weeks later, he left a voicemail saying he needed time and wanted to talk about our future. I let him believe I was still fading somewhere he couldn't see. Silence can be powerful when used correctly. Meanwhile, I moved to Boston. I stepped into the life that had been waiting for me. I met family I never knew existed. And I started working with Henry, and with the police. Because poison leaves a trail. They found the evidence in our garage. Dried oleander leaves in a coffee tin. Purchase records tied to a credit card Daniel forgot he had. Search histories that spelled out intent in plain language. Vanessa had been more careful, but not enough. Her messages told the rest of the story. They were arrested in April. Daniel looked exactly how I expected when I saw the footage later. Confused. Small. Unprepared for consequences. The trial was set for October. But before that, there was September. The gala. And that night mattered more than anything that came before it. Because for the first time since the hospital, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like myself again. Henry had warned me months earlier. Sooner or later, I would have to step into the world as who I really was. The Family Foundation hosted its annual fundraiser at the Boston Public Library, an event dedicated to pediatric cardiac research. It had been my grandfather's cause, started the year after my mother died. She had been a pediatric nurse. The board had been waiting to meet me. The press had been waiting longer. I agreed to attend. I agreed to speak. And I asked Henry for one favor. Invite Sentinel Coastal's entire executive team, I said. I want to announce the new research wing in their name. After all, they've done business with my family for years. Henry didn't ask why. He sent the invitations. Sentinel Coastal, as it turned out, employed Vanessa Bryce's older sister, Denise Bryce, Senior Vice President of Claims Administration. The same Denise Bryce who had personally approved the cancellation of my insurance the day before my surgery. I had her signature. I had the paperwork. And now I had the room. That September evening, I stood on the marble steps of the library in a dark green silk dress. My scar was hidden beneath the high neckline. My hair was pinned the way my mother wore hers in the portrait upstairs. 400 people filled the hall. Henry stood at my side. The foundation board stood behind me. I raised my glass and began. I thanked the guests. I thanked the donors. And then I thanked Sentinel Coastal. I thanked them for decades of partnership. Then I said her name. Denise Bryce. Across the room her smile froze. I watched it happen in real time. The moment recognition began to sink in. The moment she realized that the woman she had signed off on, the woman she had helped discard, was now the majority shareholder of her company. I announced the new pediatric cardiac wing at Massachusetts General. Applause followed. Then I continued. Effective immediately, The Ashford Trust would be exercising its shareholder rights to restructure Sentinel Coastal's executive claims division. An independent ethics audit would begin within days. A full report would follow. This time there was no applause. Just silence. Denise Bryce left before dessert. She didn't yet know her sister had already been arrested months earlier. She didn't yet know the full story was about to break. But she would. And when it did, the connection between an insurance company's decisions and a poisoning case in Portland became a story no one could ignore. Daniel was convicted in November. Attempted murder. 24 years. Vanessa Bryce followed. Conspiracy. 15 years. Denise Bryce was indicted later, for fraud and obstruction tied to other cases. Patterns, it turns out, rarely stay hidden forever. I didn't attend Daniel's sentencing. I thought about it. In the end, I sent Henry with a letter. The judge read it aloud. I won't repeat all of it. Just the last line. You married me for what you thought you could take. You took my trust, my health, and nearly my life. But you did not take my ability to build something better without you. That morning, while the letter was being read, I stood on the balcony of the Ashford townhouse, watching the first snow settle over the city. I held a cup of coffee. Not tea. Not anymore. Henry was waiting downstairs. We were heading to the hospital to break ground on the new wing. And I found myself thinking about the woman I had been before all of this. The teacher. The small apartment. The quiet life. She wasn't naive. He was trusting. There's a difference. And it matters. So I made a decision. I would build something for her. A place where women like her, women whose pain gets dismissed, whose symptoms get explained away, whose lives depend on someone else's decisions, would be seen the first time. Tested properly. Treated without delay. Protected. No conditions. No loopholes. No quiet cancellations. Just care. I thought about my mother. I thought she would have wanted this. I thought, I'm still here. I'm 31 years old. I'm in Ashford. And I'm alive. Then I turned, walked down the stairs, got into the car. And went to work.